Hi, it's Noah with Extreme Terrain. This is the Rancho RS 5000X front shock for a 0 to 2 inch lift on the 07 to 18 Jeep Wrangler JK. Now, if you're looking for a high-end performance upgraded shock, then a great one to pick out would be the Rancho RS 5000X. Stock shocks don't necessarily perform stupendously, especially if you've got a lift kit on your rig. Now, one way to get rid of some boaty and sloppy suspension, which seems all too common, is to swap out your stock shocks for something a little bit more performance-oriented. Now, these Rancho shocks are the perfect option to fit that bill, and they're going to provide a dramatic difference in handling and ride quality. Now, these are a bolt-in upgrade, and they work with a stock height Jeep all the way up to a 2-inch lift on a Jeep. So you have a little bit of modification freedom with them, and you're safe to throw them in now, even if you're planning on doing a lift later in time. Now, just to be clear, these are sold individually as well, and this is a front shock, so to do the install, you will need to buy 2 of these. Let's take a look at the construction of the shock and find out why it will perform better. Now, first, we've got a 2.25 twin tube shock body, and it's pretty hefty. Rancho says that these shocks utilize cross-tune technology, and they have a 13.85 compressed length and a 21.75 extended length, which means you have quite a lot of travel space. Now, doing that traveling is a 1.3 inch sintered iron piston and a 16 millimeter nitro carburized rod. Then the outside is painted in a protective white paint with a red polyvinyl accordion boot. Now, these guys are made here in the USA, and they come with a lifetime warranty. That sounds to me like they really stand behind their product, and I like that a lot. Coming in around $110 a piece, this is a pretty affordable upgraded shock in terms of all the other options out there. Rancho has definitely made a name for themselves, and with that warranty, these are a very solid option considering the price tag. Moving on to the install, this guy has an install difficulty of 2 out of 3 wrenches and an hour to get this shock installed. To walk you through the install, here's an XT customer putting this shock on their own vehicle, and they're going to show you how to do it step by step.
I think we're going to need, we've got the Rancho shocks. We're going to need a 16 millimeter wrench for the top nut if you have stock shocks. If you've already replaced them, it may be a different size. Also, if you don't have a 16 millimeter, because it's not a normal size in most tool sets, you can also use a 5/8. And then a 19 millimeter, which is the size of the new ones to the Rancho, and then an 18 millimeter wrench for the bottom bolt, as well as an 18 millimeter socket. Now, I'm using a impact wrench, but if you don't have an impact wrench, you can use a breaker bar and a socket. You may also need a pair of channel locks if you have to squeeze down the top to get the shock to go up enough to get the threads. And then also a big screwdriver, or maybe a small crowbar to get the bottom of the shock to line up with the hole. You'll need some kind of scissors to cut these straps on the shocks. Don't use your wife's good sewing scissors. You know you're going to get in trouble for that. And I think that's all we're going to need, other than, of course, a floor jack and some jack stands. Now, the bottom of the bottom bolt on these shocks is an 18 millimeter. And also I'm using a universal joint to be able to get to there. That was the easy part. Now you're going to need your 16 millimeter for the top, and we're starting on the driver's side because it's easier and you'll build your confidence for the passenger side. All right. So the top is a little hard to get to. There's no real way to get to it with the socket. So the other good thing about a jack is using it as a cheater. All right, this one was a little rusty crusty and the bolt broke off on the top, but that's all right, we're not reusing these. So now it's just a matter of pulling the old one out. There should be an old rusty washer and rubber gasket there on the top. So out with the old and in with the new. So we'll start with one of these, and we want to feed it onto there, and then a washer on top. Then we'll put this in and do the same thing on the top. All right, so we want to put it behind these lines just like the other one was. And now before we stick it through that hole, let's go ahead and get this, because we won't be able to get it later. So, as I said, there's not a lot of room. So we'll stick that in there, okay. And now we'll push up on the bottom of the shock here to get it in this bracket. Screwdriver for a little bit of leverage. There we go. All right, now we can go ahead and put the bolt back in the bottom. And this is where I was talking about needing to line up a little bit to get that started. All right, the bolt goes from the back, the nut goes on the front. Again, use that screwdriver to kind of help you line things up. And we'll tighten that up later. Now we want to put the nut on the top. And this is going to be a 19 millimeter instead of the original, which was a 16. All right. Yeah, this whole thing's going to turn on me. All right, I'm going to get some pliers to hold this, or you can get a wrench. All right, that didn't work, so found us a 19, which would work. And there's just no
What does that do?
Up here.
What is that extra
This is
tool?
going to hold the shock from spinning. All right, I think that's as tight as that goes. And I got my wrench back. All right, now let's tighten up the bottom bolt. And again, it's 18 millimeter. So we'll put a wrench to hold on the back, and then we'll tighten the front. All right, that is the driver's side. Also notice my bump stops need to be replaced. I'll be getting some new ones from Extreme Terrain next time I order. All right, let's put the wheel back on and we'll move over to the passenger side and I'll show you why this was the easy one. All right, now to the passenger side. The bottom is the same, 18 millimeter nuts on the front side, or outside. All right. So that's loose. We'll set it aside. Again, the top is a 16, or if your tool set doesn't have a 16, a 5/8 will also work. And I sprayed this one ahead of time. We'll see how it turns out. And now the reason that this side is a little more difficult is because you have a little less room up here. You have a plastic box right above it, but I think we can get to it. There we go. Yeah.
Nice.
And that one broke off too. That's okay, we're not using them again. All right. Doesn't matter how you get it out as long as you get it out. Now for the new one. We are going to cut this strap. And this time we're using the proper tools because I did what I told you not to, and I used my wife's scissors and broke them. All right, put the washer on with the rubber with the washer, and then we'll put this through here. And again, we're going to want to put this on top so we can be ready for it, because we're not going to be able to get it over there once we get it in. Oh yeah, don't forget to knock your other stuff loose. The old one. All right, so we'll stick that up there and kind of get it started through the hole there as best we can. Sort of, kind of. All right. And again, back behind the lines here, brake lines. And through that hole, and you kind of have to wiggle it around to get it through there. And then, if you're lucky, which I think we're going to be lucky, yeah, to get the threads started. If you can't get the threads started, that's where the grips come in. And grab a hold of this right here and squeeze it up, and you should be able to get those in. All right, now let's push it up and into the bottom. Here we go. And we'll go ahead and slide the bolt through just to kind of hold it while we're working on the top. Remember, the bolt goes in from the back. And may require a little persuasion. There we go. Go ahead and start that nut. All right. Now back to the top. Again, 19 millimeter. We're going to put one here to hold it in place. And we're going to start, let's see, we may be able to, there we go, spin it down a little further. Actually, we lucked out on this. We've got enough room at the top. You may or may not have much room. I know some of them don't. I'm just going to go ahead and count this as arm day. All right, let's put that loop back up over there. All right, now we're tightening the bottom. Again, 18 millimeter. There you go.
That was the Rancho RS5000X front shock for a 0 to 2 inch lift on the 07 to 18 Jeep Wrangler JK. For all things Wrangler, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.